The charitable deduction is so important right now because there's a lot of discussion about ways to raise revenue. And we don't know yet whether that's going to be from raising tax rates or cutting back on deductions or some combination of the both. But one thing that's certainly on the table is the idea that we will cut back on the amount of deductions that people can take. And one of those deductions, of course, is the deduction for the contribution of charitable deductions or charitable contributions.
Yeah, the biggest misconception about a limit on the charitable deduction is who's hurt. It's the people at the bottom of the economic spectrum who would be hurt most by a limit to the charitable deduction. The people at high income levels, they'll just reduce their donation by the amount they need to pay the tax. Smaller donations to charities means less capacity to help people at the bottom of the economic spectrum. Congress is under a lot of pressure to find new revenue, and so they're leaving no stone unturned, and they're looking for every possible source. And so they are looking at the charitable deduction as a possible source. The problem is that most of our lawmakers don't really understand what the impact would be of using the deduction as a source of revenue. Right now, governments at all levels, federal, state, and local governments, are all cutting funding for social service programs, programs that help people at the bottom of the economic spectrum, and really programs that help our society as a whole. There's an expectation that charities and other nonprofits will come in and take over for some of those services. But if charitable deduction is cut, donations to charities will be reduced, and our capacity to provide those services will be reduced also. And so the unintended consequences of using the charitable deduction as a source for government revenue would be pretty dramatic.
There's a whole myriad of types of organizations ranging from food kitchens to symphony orchestras to art museums to those who take care of after school programs for children, all kinds of human needs, almost anything imaginable.
The charitable deduction is different from other deductions in a couple of ways. One is the charitable deduction was really the first deduction. When Congress first created the income tax in the early 1900s, they were concerned that the income tax would negatively impact charitable giving. And so they created the charitable deduction so that the new income tax wouldn't interfere with charitable giving. So even back then, Congress recognized how critical charitable giving was in our society.
We have just a little over a month before all these changes to the tax law come about, and also some automatic spending cuts that people will think will throw the economy back into a recession. The whole tax code is part of the mix, and again, the charitable contribution deduction is a big part of that. What we're talking about probably will be either a dollar cap on itemized deductions or some kind of percentage cap on the value of itemized deductions. That would be all itemized deductions, including the charitable contribution. But the effect of it would be that people who make those donations would see less tax benefit from making them than they do under today's law. And that translates into less of an incentive to give than what we have now. And that, of course, will translate into fewer donations made.
The second way that the charitable deduction is different from other deductions is that the donor, the person who's donating to charity, who's then getting the deduction, that's the only benefit they get. What the donor gets, what they're really striving for, is that good feeling in their heart that they've done something right and they've given back to their society. And yes, they get the deduction, but mainly that just allows them to make a bigger contribution than they would have if they were taxed on that deduction.
Should we be looking at more incentives to give instead of less? And I think the answer is yes. It's very important for those who care about these entities, these charities, and having adequate funding to do their mission, to go to Capitol Hill to talk to members of Congress and explain that yes, it might make sense from a tax policy point of view, but there's going to be a lot of human suffering involved. There's going to be a lot of more difficulty in trying to meet the needs of Americans.